He spoke to us like a couple of days in advance that this is what he was thinking of doing. Once he actually made the decision that that's what we were going to do, then I got hold of all my division heads and said, right, what's the impact? How are we going to change the shore excursions? Let's talk about that and let's make a plan for that. How are we going to change the gangway setups? Have we notified the ports that we're coming in different orders? How have we got everybody ready, all of the backup? Is the immigration, the customs, is everybody waiting for us on the piers? Have we looked at the dining room and the food and beverage operation? Are we going to change our hours of operation there? What does it mean with people coming back at 8 o'clock? So, as you say, there's a lot of questions to be dealt with. The great thing is on here, we've got a phenomenal team of people, and it's one of the excitements of being a manager, isn't it? If you're just doing the same thing all the time, it can get boring. But you throw something new into the mix, and then you can see who really knows what they're doing. But I've got a great team, so it worked out well, I think. Grandeur.
I have another question, port side, forward.
I don't know if you want to answer or not. What's the most frightening thing ever happened to you on a ship?
Well, on a normal cruise, I would say it's the moment when we open the windjammer door on a turnaround day and the rush of people comes in and I'm standing there holding my plate and I'm really fearing my life now. We had the situation last cruise where we were very close to having to muster all the guests and crew on board to their muster stations. The coffee machine broke on the bridge. And that's, you can imagine this, if you don't have coffee on the bridge, how serious that is. But other than that, we've been very lucky.
My most frightening moment was last night at the Quest when we had 6 gentlemen dress up as ladies. They were lovely. Greta.
Another question, port side, forward.
On your forward radar on the bow, I noticed it was only running at least in the fog or at night. So what's the difference with that one, and what's its sensitivity, and what's the smallest thing you can detect with that one?
Well, the main thing is the elevation. It's closer to the surface, so and we mainly, like I said, mainly used it in fog and reduced visibility. But because it's closer to the sea level, it has a shorter range than the other ones, so that's why we use those regularly when we are at sea, because they have a little bit longer range.
Greta.
Another question, port side.
Thank you. I have 2, if I may. The first is, how do the thrusters work? The forward and aft thrusters, are they stationary? Are there big fans mounted in the hull? Do you use them for more than just moving sideways in and out of ports? And the second question, it's always fascinated me, the guys with those massive ropes and how they moor the ship. Are there rules or geometry involved in the angles of the ropes and how you tie them up and that kind of thing?
Yeah, actually, these are very good questions. First of all, the thrusters, they are stationary. Like you said, they're like fans that push us sideways. And that's the only thing that we use them for. We push the ship sideways, or to spin it. We use the bow thrusters to go in one direction and the stern thruster in the opposite direction, and that way we can turn the ship around on the dot. The ropes, of course, it depends on the angle. We have what we call headlines, breastlines, and springs. The springs, they stop the ship from surging along the pier, and the headlines to a certain degree. But the breastlines, they pull the ship up against the pier. So they are the ones that are holding the ship alongside, and the other lines to stop the side movement.
Next question and back, port.
Quick question. Why are you traveling so far offshore? It takes time to get out to the continental shelf, up and all the way back. I don't understand why you're not sailing closer to shore.
You mean now on the way from St. John to Baltimore? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Yeah. Basically, because of the Nantucket shore, it is too shallow for us to go straight, and that's why we go around it.
Greta.
Port side meet.
2 questions. Coming out of Bar Harbor, we kept seeing these little white things flashing in the water for quite a distance out. And number 2, why are the emergency exit lights on in the hallways. They were on last night and this morning.
That's for, we have to test them every month just to make sure that they are ready for operation at all times. So we have people working on the entire ship, and if they see a broken light bulb, then we replace it. Regarding these floating objects, and those are lobster traps, which up in around Portland, Bar Harbor, and in that area there is a lot of lobster. And I'm sure you noticed that the next day we had lobster on the menu.
Next question up front.
Yes, Captain, you indicated there were 3 people on the bridge at all times. Now, is there no designated helmsman?
Yeah, well, we do a designated helmsman. They look at us as a helmsman, but under the circumstances where we do require him to go hand steering, that means that there is a situation where we also need to increase the manning level. Like tonight when we pick up the pilot, there will be an additional lookout, so there will be 2 lookouts, and they take turns hand steering, and in addition it will be either myself, the staff captain, or the chief officer who will be there as an extra manning on the bridge. So we increase the manning with the increased workload up on the bridge. But this is the absolute basic when we are at sea in open waters, good visibility, and there's light traffic. We have 2 bridge officers, the lookout, and the autopilot is doing all the hard work.
Greta.
Port side meet.
Yeah, well, you did a nice job in avoiding a serious storm this past week, and I'm sure you've done that many times. Have you ever run into a storm you could not avoid as such?
Yes, on cargo ships. When I was on cargo ships sailing both between Iceland and Europe and Iceland North America, you just have to plow right through it. There's no the cargo on board the cargo ship doesn't complain about the weather, but you have to keep your schedule. You can't change the discharging or loading port. That's fixed. So we had to go through it, and then you can imagine in the wintertime in the North Atlantic you can get the roughest weather there is.
Next question in the middle.
How far out will we pick up the pilot going back to Baltimore?
At the entrance of the Chesapeake Bay, just off Cape Henry, it's about 3 miles from shore, so you will be able to see land very, very closely.
Greta.
Port side meet.
In terms of the business and the profitability, just curious as to what a percentage of income would be labor, food, fuel, and what are the 4 largest expenses?
Well, the largest expense, of course, is the fuel, and the second largest is the labor, I guess, yeah. And then the food.
Next question, Starboard.
How long are the typical crew contracts, and how do you deal with the constant turnover and orientating new people to the ship?
If you're lucky, like my colleagues over here, then you work like 10 days on, 10 days off. But if you're working in the hotel operation, if you're one of the senior managers like Bob or Kareem, we work 4 months on, 2 months off. Most of the crew that you interact with, the waiters and the stateroom attendants and the housekeeping team, they work 6 months on, 2 months off. And then I've got a bunch of guys in the laundry who work 9 months on, 2 months off. As you say, there's a constant changeover of people. Each time we're in Baltimore, you've got 20 or 30 people getting off and 20 or 30 people getting on. And we do a whole induction program when you come on the ship, specifically about safety. So the first few days you're on the ship, you're getting a lot of training with regards to safety. And because everybody's got 2 jobs on the ship. So I might be the hotel director, but my other job is I'm the evacuation controller. So each crew member has a safety job. So you've got 2 jobs on board. So we do an induction program for that. If the crew is coming from another ship, it's pretty simple because there are some changes, but it's Royal Caribbean International policies and standards. And so we all do things the royal way. If you're brand new to ships, then it's more intensive, And you know, you're going to help that crew member a lot more as they come on board. And we have buddies, a buddy system if you're brand new, so someone will look after you for the first couple of weeks that you're on board. And we're very lucky. It's pretty seamless, the transition as people go through. As you get to the senior positions, such as, you know, the captain or the chief engineer or the staff captain or myself, then we do very detailed handover notes to each other, and we usually get some time to spend with each other on the turnaround day to make sure that we understand where the ship's going. And we also get notes sent to us 2 weeks before we arrive. So we've got a briefing in our heads, which gives us a chance to ask questions. And it happens right through the business with the management teams as well. But it's a fascinating dynamic. And you imagine, a lot of the schedulers are based in Manila in the Philippines who are planning all of these schedules. And the crew travel operation in Miami. And you're flying 50,000 people around the world to different ports. It's a really interesting, challenging dynamic to be doing all of that planning. But it's a great company, it works very well.
It's, John, it's 10 weeks, not 10 days.
Oh, sorry, 10 days. I thought it was 10 weeks, sorry, 10 weeks.
Okay, Greta.
I have another question, portside back.
I have 2 questions. What's the biggest ship you've been the captain of? And what's your favorite ship?
Oh, my favorite ship, of course, is the Grandeur. And the biggest ship that I've been a captain of was the Liberty of the Seas. I probably forget to mention that when I was in the beginning.
Next question up front.
Okay, this is about the Chesapeake Bay. Do the laws of the 3 miles out apply when you're in the Chesapeake Bay? Example, opening the casino, or are there any other rules that are different when you're sailing in the bay rather than on the ocean?
No, the laws regarding the casino, they go from the shoreline, and of course the Chesapeake Bay is inside that area. So those laws apply from as soon as you enter U.S. waters and all the way up to the pier.
Greta.
Another question, portside.
Thank you. I see lots of different safety systems on the ship. I guess you've got the huge lifeboats that we use for tenders, and those barrels and descent stations. Can you talk a little bit about those stations, how they be used in an emergency, and how long would it really take to deploy one of those big lifeboats from deck 6 in an emergency?
Well, the lifeboats, for the most part, are filled with guests. Then we have crew assigned to each lifeboat to assist the guests in it. The life rafts, they come in addition, and we assign the crew to those rafts, because the process is, once everybody has been mustered and accounted for, if in the unlikely event we have to abandon the ship, because in most cases the ship is the safest place to be on, and we would try to avoid abandoning it for as long as we can. If we do have to abandon the ship, we would first launch the lifeboats, and then the raft afterwards, and have the crew follow.
Next question, right up front.
Yes, my question was one of, I've heard some rumors that this may be close to end of life for Grandeur, and we're enjoying Grandeur very much. You enjoy it. What's your comment on that?
For the planned future, there's no plans of selling or sending the Grandeur anywhere else. I get this question a lot. There's a lot of rumors out there. People are gossiping and chatting amongst each other. But the Grandeur, there's no plans to send us away from Baltimore, and there's no plans to sell the Grandeur unless somebody would come and offer like $1 trillion or something outrageous that we can't turn down.
But he read it on the internet, so it must be true. Indeed. Next question, Greta.
Question, portside.
I believe this might be for the engineer. I noticed that it's listed you have 4 diesel engines. Can you talk a little bit about how you alternate, or do you alternate engines on a cruise, or use them all at the same time?
So you're right, we have 4 engines here. We are using the engines depending on the power consumption. And the most powerful consumer are propulsions. So depending on the required speed of the ship, we are using the engine. So generally, when you have to cruise on high speed or 23 knots, we are using 4 engines. When we have to cruise on low speed, like 10, 14 to 14 knots, we are using 2 engines. And the ship is designed so always 2 engines to be used for propulsion.
Thank you. Next question up front.
As an employer, you've got people from probably 50 different countries serving this ship. How do you recruit them?
We have an international network of hiring partners throughout the world. We have quite heavy concentrations out in the Philippines, in Indonesia, China, where we draw a lot of our crew members from. But as you say, there's over 55 nationalities represented on board. To become, I'll give you an example, to become an assistant waiter on Royal Caribbean International, you need to have been a waiter in a 4 or 5 star establishment for 3 to 5 years in your home country and be able to speak English to a Marlin's test. There's a special English test that we do for people. So my people are the creme de la creme from their home countries. And the demographic mix on this ship, as quite common throughout the fleet really, the largest number of crew members come from the Philippines, then India, Indonesia, Jamaica, very few from the United States, which is surprising to me, and very few from Western Europe. But the opportunity of working for Royal Caribbean International, we pay very well, industry standard-wise, so crew members can have a decent standard of living when they return home. I appreciate they're away from their families and you sacrifice to come on board for six months at a time. But on the other hand, there are a lot of benefits associated with being on board. Salaries are very good, full medical and healthcare coverage when you're on board. We are very sympathetic to crew member needs, compassionate needs if we need to accommodate special leave. If we've got long-term relationships or married couples on board, we accommodate them. So we take a positive approach to our teams, and you'd be surprised, we were at yesterday, day before, when we did the service awards, and you've got people who've been working for the company for 20, 30 years, you know, on these contracts every 6 months. So it's a great company to work for, and we are very conscious of looking after the crew.
All right, we have time for 3 more questions. First question.
How long does it take to build a ship like this?
Roughly, it's about 2 years from the time they start the building process. I think the gentleman in the back, he's trying to get your attention, Bob.
I have another one, port side forward.
Do the crew members get to pick the ships they want, or are they assigned?
It comes with service, so senior levels and senior managers, we usually work about 3 years on a ship, and then we'll get transferred to 2 other ships. Crew members, and similarly, however, if you've worked 10 years for the company, then we give you a choice of which ships you want, so you can pick the top 3 ships you want to go to, and chances are you'll get one of those.
All right, final question in back.
So this is for the captain, and I was just wondering, where are you from, and like, how did you get this job, and where did you like think of?
Originally, I'm coming from Iceland, and I started sailing. It was kind of a coincidence. A friend of mine, he decided to join or apply for to join the Coast Guard back home. I went with him and I filled out the form, and then they called me and on him. And I've been doing this since. I was on cargo ships. My last job on a cargo ship was on a chemical tanker as a captain. And one day I decided to, like I mentioned earlier, switch over and start cruising for a living, which is very nice. They even pay me too much. I don't know why, but yeah, I just applied and I was hired as a second officer and had to work my way up again to become a captain.
All right, somebody gave Greta $5 for one more question.
Yeah, back in, you have 50 megawatts of generation here. What % of that is house power versus propulsion?
We are not counting in horsepower propulsion, we are counting in megawatts. Actually, horsepower, we are counting the The capacity of the engine. Engines are 16,500 horsepower each. So by 4 is about 64,000 horsepower for the engines. This is the energy which are giving to propulsion.
Thank you very much. Let's have a nice round of applause for our 3 fabulous executive officers. Chief Engineer, Hotel Director, as well as the Master of the Vessel. And again, give the captain another round of applause for the wonderful weather. Thank you very much, sir. Greatly appreciated.